Alright everyone, the Democrats keep trying to mess up even worse, and occasionally Joe Manchin is actually pulling them back from the edge of the cliff, which is hilarious because in party, among West Virginians he's reasonably popular, which is funny because he's a Democrat in a heavily red state. That's because he doesn't act like a typical Democrat. He appears to have some understanding of the economy, and if you look at AOC, Ilhan Omar, brain-dead potato Biden, they don't understand how to balance a checkbook. They see government basically as a personal piggy bank. I find it very funny that they always talk about Manchin being controlled by the coal and oil industries. He's in West Virginia. What other industries would he be controlled by? Of course he's influenced by big oil and big coal. It would be nicer, arguably, I hate to fucking say this, it's difficult for me to say as an anti-Bushite, but maybe we should have more politicians that are being influenced by the domestic energy industry as opposed to the Chinese solar panel industry. Maybe that would help with the gas prices. Just saying that it could have some fringe benefits. He's blocked what would have been a massive environmentalism spending bill. It's essentially a backdoor New Green Deal. They keep fucking pushing the same thing over and over. They want tens of billions for windmills, which will use Chinese materials, solar fields, which are woefully inefficient, use Chinese materials, destroy elements of the environment. They want a bunch of money for CO2 emissions studies and shit like that. Don't you think that we have bigger things to pay for in the middle of a recession? We should have rejoined the Paris Climate Accords, etc. All of the proposals, if you look at them, are also NIMBYism. What do? They effectively penalize U.S. industry and U.S. homeowners and U.S. workers. And the emissions still exist because it doesn't change the law of supply and demand. You still have the emissions, you still have the pollution, you still have the same jobs, it's just that you've taken them and instead of having solid middle-class industrial jobs in the US, you've allowed them to be promulgated in China or India. The reason why the globalists do this is because they have investments in China and India. To them, it's easier to make an additional profit for the big guy to get his 10% if you have it in a country with less workers' rights, less environmental protocols. It doesn't matter where the cheap shit is made. If it's made in the US, though, the workers might unionize. They're not going to do that in China. They might want better pay. Well, that shit, we're making less of a profit now. Though there might be an environmental impact study, when the EPA actually does its job, which occasionally it does, we might get penalized here. But if we dump this toxic slurry that costs a lot to remove safely in the Ganges River or something, the nation of India doesn't care. We grease a few palms and nobody ever knows that it happened. Hey, the river's already on fire as it is. I don't think anybody's going to notice a couple more steel barrels floating down the river next to all the charnel remains. It's pork barrel. Really what it is an attempt to take enormous amounts of taxpayer money, fund a few pet projects that will never see a return, and embezzle most of that money. This is also the case at this point for the Ukrainian spending bills. It's not just weaponry that's being sent. It ends up on the black market on the dark web, by the way. Apparently you can now buy anti-tank launchers for about 20 grand on there. I wish that I could just buy them direct. You should be able to just go down to the local gun store and get an RPG, but unfortunately it'll take a while to repeal the NFA and all the other unconstitutional gun control in the United States. Once that happens, it'd be nice to have an RPG. Good for garden defense. Yeah, hunting bears with RPGs. Yeah, I couldn't harvest any of the meat, but some of the bones are still intact. I sold them on eBay. I recouped the cost of the grenade that I fired at its head. I digress. I'm semi-joking, of course. Joe Manchin, though, while he should be applauded for this, and he has stood the line on the filibuster, that's to his credit, he certainly stood the line against the Green New Spiel bullshit spending, again, partially because of the influence in West Virginia of the coal lobby. Useful idiot, though. He totally cucked on gun control. He could have come out and said, well, my constituents don't want red flag laws and shit like that, which they don't. West Virginia, again, it's 70% Republicans. It's extremely rural, for the most part. It's quite conservative. And it's gotten more conservative over the years, over the last few decades. Just to be clear, it's one of the states that is definitely moving in that direction. deviating heavily from next door Virginia. Now, there was a reason that these states split. Originally it was slavery. Now it's apparently slavery to the Green New Deal and to anti-gun laws. Very telling, since anti-gun laws began after Cruikshank, and that was also a slaveholder's decision. Well, Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow. Very, very telling. That split is still there. Joe Manchin is correct on many things. He's not correct on guns. Also, he's kind of moralistic. It's funny, he's one of the more religious members of Congress. He is an outlier, generally speaking. But when he does something correct, like, prevent another maybe 0.5, 1.0 increase in inflation by not being willing to greenlight this horseshit and say, well, we're going to pass, however many hundreds of billions of dollars in spending during a recession with arguably now stagflation that the taxpayers have to cover. He should be applauded for that. I would just, again, caution people, criticism should be levied when appropriate as well. Joe Manchin being more sane than AOC, that's kind of low-hanging fruit now, isn't it? And being more sane than Biden just means that your mind hasn't melted with Kuru or something like that at this point. So it is good. Although if the Democrats had passed this, the inflation might show up before midterms doing more structural damage. Honestly, I think this is more about political pragmatism for him and others that oppose it than it is about the principle of it's wrong to spend massive amounts while you have mass inflation. To be clear, even with Manchin, I'm not sure that's particularly the reason. In his case, it probably is the energy lobby. Well, good. At least it's U.S. energy and not a bunch of Chinese crap that's made by little kids, 10-year-old slaves over in China, and then used to take over land in the United States under the guise of energy development. Yeah, it's an improvement. That's about all. Peace out.